What's going on, everybody? This is Pastor Dan with your midweek high five. Last week, we talked a little bit about marriage, and as we approach the holidays, and I just had the privilege of celebrating 16 years of marriage this past week. I want to talk one more thing about marriage. And, last week we talked about my mistakes. This week, I want to talk about the biggest mistake that I've encountered in my marriage, but also as a pastor, counseling other marriages. And that is this, that is having an expectation of your spouse that only God could meet. So many times people get married, they get engaged, and they think that their spouse is going to complete them. In fact, it's kind of part of our culture. We talk about songs that say, "You're the half that makes me whole." Right? We have this expectation that we're going to get fulfillment from our spouse. Then we find out that our spouse is jacked up, and that leaves us very discouraged. And who are we upset at? God. Why? Because we're looking for something from our spouse that truly can only be given to us from God. It's so crucial to understand and imperative. I think sometimes we can almost create an idolatry within our marriage where we glorify and almost worship that with these expectations of what we're going to receive from our spouse. And when those expectations don't be met, when we find out there's gaps, then there's not perfection in our spouse. That leaves us discouraged, disgruntled, and sometimes spouses there will be a divorce because one is looking for that fulfillment in every which thing. And it's one thing to look for that, in drugs or alcohol. We understand those are more glaring needs. But marriage is something we don't always think about. And as we look at this, it's something to consider that marriage, according to Matthew 29:30, is not even in heaven. So, Jesus responding to those that were challenging him on the resurrection said, look, there will be no marriage in heaven. And yet we spend so much emphasis on marriage, and marriage is super important. Don't hear me say that it is not important. Please don't take me. But what I think we're doing is we're engaging in relationships with these expectations that they are going to make us whole. And that is a challenge that I think we all face. But the greatest way to overcome that obstacle, the greatest way to overcome that challenge is absolutely through Christ. In Psalm 107:9, speaking of God, he says, "For he satisfies the longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things." This is God who satisfies the longing soul. We will not get that satisfaction from our spouse. No matter how great or how awesome they are, they will always fall short. There's only one that truly satisfies. Jesus, and speaking of himself in John 6:35, he says of himself, he says, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall not thirst." What a promise to be given. But we need to remind ourselves sometimes of that promise, that really, as our spouse, we're in this together to worship and glorify God. And the woman or the man is not to be worshiped. The woman or the man is not to be glorified. They are partners in this life, and they help us grow in our relationship with Christ. But they are not the foundation for our relationship with Christ. They certainly do not create the fulfillment that you and I so long for. And I think we can buy and believe into the lie that our culture says that these relationships are really what's going to complete us. I just want to encourage you this week as you go through the holidays, and maybe sometimes it can be a frustrating time for families and couples. Just want to encourage you, find your satisfaction in God, and evaluate even in your own relationship, maybe where you're putting those false expectations on your spouse that they would perform as if they are God, and leaving you left wanting more because they are not. So praying for you, love you. If there's anything we can do for you, please reach out. Let's celebrate together through the holidays, glorifying him together with our spouses. God bless y'all. Talk to you soon.